Hi, Andy. How you doing? Andy? All right. Wait a minute.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I don't. You're both on as a panelist and as attendee.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I typically run another computer just to make sure what I'm showing to the public makes sense. So,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm hearing you now as a panelist, and I did make you a co-host.
thank you.
So, so right now, let's see. We have Councilor Khan. So, and everyone from Planning and Development is here. We're just waiting on Councilor Zede.
Yes, Chair, can you hear me? Just want to make sure.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry about the other day.
Not a problem for me.
Okay.
It looked like it was a problem for you, though.
Yeah, it was. It was. I'm okay now. Thanks.
Yeah, no, you're loud. You're very clear right now.
Oh, good.
So that's good. There's Lisa. I'll give it another minute, and then we'll begin. What is that? Council Zede is on now, so let's see. Heather, you're unmuted. So I'll call Budget and Finance Committee to order. Heather, do you want to call your committee to order?
Sure, calling Planning and Development Committee to order.
Okay, we're all set. Everyone is here. So I think you can see the agenda before you. We'll start out, we have jointly in our two committees, Order 214, which is a Low Street purchase. So the planning director has offered, I've shared, he's a co-host, so he can share his screen. He is going to put up a representation of Low Street. I thought we would start out with a very brief overview of this. We're time limited. We have an hour and a half. There's a Central Waterfront ad hoc committee meeting at 7. And Budget and Finance, we have a number of other items we'd sort of like to get to, including Fuller Field. Chair Shand and I spoke earlier. We're going to take this out at, I think it's the November 9th meeting, but simply for the purpose of referring back to our two committees and to the committee of the whole, so that all councilors can speak to it in committee. That would enable City Council President Eigenman, who has, as you know, filed that communication in planning and development, to speak as well. So we are not going to take this out for a vote on November 9th, but so I would say today we're trying to get questions out there and further discussion, points for further discussion. Andy, you want to take it for a brief sort of overview here, where we're at?
Sure. Thank you, Counselor. Would you like me to speak to not only the property itself and the acquisition, but also to Counselor Eigenman's communication?
Well, at this, briefly on that, but, I noted that in the communication from the mayor, she cited that this property was worth purchasing whether or not youth services go there.
Agreed.
So as a first approximation, I'd like to hear that argument, if that includes, and I think that would include reference to the wetlands. So I think that would be good.
Sure. Okay. So I think all of you can see this aerial photograph here. This is from the city's own Geographic Information System, GIS, on the website. What you're looking at here, just to orient you, is the middle school, obviously. This is the National Guard property. It's a panhandle shape, and the vast majority of it, this back portion here that I'm just going to show you my cursor. This portion that I'm pointing to in the whole panhandle or handle part back here, it's largely wetlands. So really the usable portion of the property is up front. And obviously the National Guard has done that with the main building and the brick building garage, which actually apparently was constructed a few years earlier than the main building. So that's just an overview of the property itself. The mayor had been discussing purchasing a portion of the property with the National Guard for some time. I just want to show another sketch plan here just to show both the wetlands boundary and the parcel itself. So this is this PDF that I'm going to be showing you is a what we call an A&R plan, and it's got a wetlands delineation on it. So basically this is just a plan taking the front portion of that parcel without the handle piece down here and just blowing it up, and it's basically showing the property boundaries, what is proposed to be acquired by the city. So this is the lot 1A or A1, which is this roughly rectangular piece here, is the portion that the mayor has been discussing purchasing with the National Guard. There was a little discussion early on about how far that line might go, but this is the portion of the property the National Guard would retain. So just blowing that up a little bit to get more information. That's the brick building that's there today. This is obviously a black and white plan. It's not as easy to read, but you can see the bituminous concrete area is delineated here in front of the brick building and out to the street. And then there's wetlands at the back of the property. These, one of the first things that I had recommended when the mayor started discussing this with the National Guard and with Andy Egmont at Youth Services about doing a feasibility study for Youth Services, I had recommended that we do a wetlands delineation. That was for two reasons. One, so that the city would know what options we had for future use, regardless of NYS, but also for specifically if a feasibility study was going to be done for NYS, that we knew the architects would know how much space they could work with for building footprint and site impacts. So this plan right here is essentially showing where the wetlands are. And what you'll see here is these WFs, these dots and the WFs, those are the wetland flags. And so I'm just running my cursor along here. You can see that's the wetland boundary. And so most of the property up front, this portion of the property up front is upland, so that's not wetland. Then we reach the wetland boundary back here. And one thing you'll notice, because I'm going to show you an aerial photograph of the property in a second as well, just for clarity, this is the fence that's at the back of that that you'll see in the photograph there. So there's a portion of the wetlands that are essentially in an area that's been mowed historically, by the National Guard, but it's actually by soil conditions, I presume, I think by the wetland scientist, it's actually wetlands. So they've noted that. And then what you notice here also as well, another important note is just that there's some upland back here behind the front portion of wetland. There's basically sort of a donut shape here. This is the portion of upland that's in the back. So that's just an overview of the portion of property that's to be acquired. I just wanted to show you an aerial photograph of that. So this right here is an aerial photograph of the property. This is actually looking in the opposite direction. So the middle school is right here. That's a National Guard building, and this is the garage portion. So what you'll see is that roughly the rectangular shape that would be purchased, it would be this portion here, is essentially being purchased for 25 cents on the dollar. So I think based on property values in Newburyport, the limited land left for development, although we could debate how certain development's done, there is in fact limited space just horizontally for development in the city. So it makes sense, I think, based on the property value that we'd be paying for it to acquire this property, to have it for future use. The city does not have, for instance, adequate facilities for the parks department. There's been obviously discussion about youth services, whether to relocate them here. So this site, regardless of what it is used for, I think is definitely the city's financial interest to purchase that. The powder house is located right here, so that's just one other thing to note. And so the line would actually meet the fence and the easement line for the powder house itself. So that's the property itself. I'm happy to go into and speak, defer to the counselor in the committee, but I'm happy to speak to any other issues that folks have about either the wetlands or the property itself, anything else you're interested in.
Okay, so I would entertain any questions from any counselors, any comments, any requests for further information. Anyone? Can you hear me? You can hear me. I have a member of the public would like to speak, so I think I will allow that. And again, we'll keep to the 2-minute period of time. So Haley Knudsen, if you could unmute yourself, you should be able to be heard.
Hi, thanks for that. Apologies if I've missed the public comment section of this. I have 3 young kids at home and time escapes me quite frequently at the moment. I just wanted to call in and just offer my support for purchasing the land for potential use for the youth services building. I know a lot of parents that I've spoken with would be really excited to see it used for that as well, but I think parents are a little bit under pressure right now to have another thing to have to think about and support, but I know there is a lot of support for it. So I just wanted to speak on behalf of us and lend my ear to that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I seem to have lost my my ability to see the participants. So let I get you back. So there are some other attendees one other who wishes to speak. Jared Hubbard, if you unmute yourself, you can speak.
Yes, my name is Jared Hubbard. I'm at 49 Boardman Street, and I also have 3 children. I'm a member of the Friends of Newburyport Youth Services, and I would be very supportive of buying this property. I think Director Port was accurate that it should be bought no matter what's done with it. I do think it would be a great home for Newburyport Youth Services. With regard to Councillor Eigerman's letter, I don't know if that's being addressed directly today, but I have done some legal analysis. I am an attorney. I have done a little bit of legal analysis on that letter, and which I've sent to Councillor Shand and Councillor Khan. So I don't know if that's going to be circulated or not, but I don't think that there's any reason that the wetland should prevent a purchase of the property, and I don't think we should put any restrictions on the property at this point. As we sort of look at the purchase, any restrictions should be done sort of as a full evaluation of what should be done with that property following a purchase. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Hubbard. Okay, now back. That's it for public comments. Would any of the panelists, Chair Shand?
Yeah, just a quick one, Andy. When you showed the delineation of where the current building is, it was in the buffer region. Are there restrictions on building in the buffer region after the fact? I mean, I know there's a building there already, but what are the requirements for that?
Right, so that's a good question. So on this plan here, if I just go in a little closer for you, hopefully you can all see that. There's outside the wetland flagging line, there's actually lines that are shown as a buffer to that. So there's a couple of series of those, basically arcs. You can see them going out, and there's a line that says buffer 100 feet. So the closest line there that's a buffer is actually the 25-foot line. The local conservation commission does not like work to be done in the immediate proximity of the wetlands. So they have this no disturb area that they expect no disturbance to happen. And I did go to meet with them, I think it was earlier this year, might have been even late last year, to talk with them about what kind of possibilities we would have here on this site, given the wetland constraints. And I talked to them about the fact that, let me just zoom out a bit to show you a little better. I mentioned before that there was some upland at the back of the property in between the wetlands here. And what I wanted to go and talk to the Conservation Commission about, I was essentially playing the role of, project manager if the city was going to buy this property, and in conjunction with that, and the mayor's interest in looking at it for youth services, what would be the limitations for us? What site issues do we have to look at? That would be a normal responsibility for a planning director or a project manager for a project like this. So I recommended we get the wetlands delineation. And part of that was because I wanted to know how much flexibility we had for putting a building footprint or parking. And what this plan actually showed me, as I mentioned before, the wetlands actually come further forward than the fence line here, even though this is really mowed as grass. So what this really shows, though, is that from a regulatory perspective, without the formality of going before the Conservation Commission for permitting and having specific development plans, there's really a limitation as to the footprint of buildings that could be here or parking areas. So in that taking into account as well, the 25-foot no disturb area. So that really pushes everything up towards the street. So there's not a lot of development potential at the back of the property. However, what I did discuss with the Conservation Commission was something else that would normally be discussed in a situation like this, is whether or not it would be possible to relocate some of the wetlands that are towards the front, that are essentially inconveniently located, into an upland area at the back, so that this is essentially one contiguous wetland area. That is frequently done by developers when they're looking to make a more workable site in a certain area and basically consolidating the wetlands. The Conservation Commission does have a policy about replacing wetlands or replicating them. So that would be part of the project. So what I was trying to figure out with them at the time was how much flexibility did they envision allowing for this type of project. They didn't give any specific approval. They reserve obviously their permitting control during oversight of a project, but they did indicate that there was some willingness to allow the replication work if needed to, make the project work. So having that sort of informal conversation with them, we were then able to, translate that information for the architects and explain that really for the feasibility study or anything else we're looking at in the future, we really need to push things towards the street. But if need be, we may be able to discuss with the commission modifying some of the wetland boundary towards the front here and moving some of those wetlands to the upland at the back. So that was just in a nutshell, the wetlands issue as I understand it right now. I won't speak to the CR issue or the conservation restriction unless you want me to speak to that as well.
Do you have this is the latest wetlands map. Have they moved over time? Are they encroaching on where the building is now?
Wetlands do change over time. I don't know how much that will change in the future. I don't know how much it's changed since the past, in the past. But they do change over time. And that's one reason I'm not immediately keen on putting a restriction on the property. The other one is that we don't really know what our future use might be of the property. So, I think there's a question mark about that in my mind. But you can see that there's, less than 50 feet between the closest wetland boundary and the existing building. So there's not much, from a general overview of this property, there's really not a whole lot of development potential at the back of the property anyway, with or without a restriction.
Okay, thanks, Andy.
Councilor Wallace?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Loud and clear.
excellent. I have several questions and comments. Maybe we'll just do one at a time and see where it takes us. Yeah, first off, I'm just looking at the site constraints, and one thing I mentioned in one of our committee meetings last week was getting the wetland location certified. There is a process called an ANRAD with the Conservation Commission, which stands for Abbreviated Notice of Resource Area Delineation. And that's a way to make sure that your wetland line is locked in before you do any development there. And it protects the seller or the buyer. It would be a good idea to do that before purchase of the property, because all we've heard so far is, the Conservation Commission looked at this, it was flagged, but we haven't seen anything, in a public meeting as to how it was flagged. It'd be nice to hear from, the wetland scientists. The reason I say that is a couple comments, Andy, and maybe you could scroll down. There's a wetland flow out in the front in the swale. Yep, in the road. So that should have a buffer zone, I believe. that's not shown, even though it's not on the property, that would have a buffer zone as well, assuming that's bordering vegetated wetlands. That's just one comment that maybe to look into. And another comment I have is, our question is, are there wetlands between the two properties, between this site and the residential property? Because you would, even though it's not on your property, you still need to show the wetlands, I think 100 feet. So I'm not sure if there's any swales there that would also then have additional buffer zones. That's one question or comment I would like to have looked into.
Well, I can tell you is that, generally speaking, the National Guard of the state would not be looking to file a notice of resource area delineation or partner with us to file that prior to selling the property. I don't think that they're looking to have any particular restrictions or things like that in advance based on our discussions with them. You've pointed out, we've discussed the fact that there's a substantial portion of the property that already has wetlands at the back. The wetland scientist that flagged this is responsible for flagging the wetlands on the property and picking up adjacent features. I presume that from the arc that they've shown towards the upper left-hand corner of the plan there, for those buffers, that they determined that there wasn't any wetland area or buffer on the adjacent property that needed to be taken into account, and that was essentially the closest resource area and buffer that was affecting the property we would be purchasing, so Lot 1A1. As to the swale that you mentioned up front, I can't speak to that unless there's something that's gone before the commission, but generally speaking, and you may not be aware of this, but the commission has had discussions with the business park community for years. And there has been discussion about the distinction between man-made drainage swales or conveyances and wetland resource areas. I'm not necessarily convinced, especially given the bituminous asphalt that already goes out to the street there. I'm not sure that I would argue that there's more wetland area out towards the street than this wetland scientist has flagged there. I think that a pretty good amount of the property is already restricted by wetlands. I'm not convinced that the front portion there is a resource area per se, but I would defer to the commission. But in the past, they've typically seen those swales as being man-made conveyances for stormwater, which is generally how they were constructed.
Right. No, I hear what you're saying. Generally, at least in my experience, they are flagged as wetland unless there's been some sort of regulation that's changed. But I guess I don't want to go back and forth on what it is. That gets to my point that there may be questions here, and we just need to make sure we get it right and we nail it down and something doesn't come back later. So I do think it's important to find out if there's additional wetlands within 100 feet. You need to do that. So in case there's additional buffer zone. But that leads me to my next point. I sent around to the council earlier today on the state website. There is public information regarding prior contamination on the site. And what they did, this was back in the late 90s, they had to do some borings and test pits, or maybe not borings and monitoring wells. So looking at those, the groundwater is very high throughout the site. In some cases, 3 feet. And if you look at the soil logs, there is clay throughout the site and called gray clay. So this likely is all former filled wetland, which that's what happened in the 50s. Some of these industrial areas, they would fill them. So it's probably former wetland, which the hydric soils and the clay soils show you with a couple feet on top. So it's wet. Actually, as you look at this picture, you can see the wet pavement. So I just want to make sure we have the lines right. I think it's worth more discussion, maybe not in this venue, but I wouldn't feel comfortable moving ahead until we nail this all down and maybe bring the Conservation Commission into the discussion with the city councilors. So that's one comment I have. Just quickly, a couple other things that I would like to see. I mean, if we are responsible for purchasing this property, it's as if, we're buying our own house, we're protecting the taxpayers' money. So I think the councilors should do a site visit, including inside of the building. I mean, I can't imagine approving it without seeing the property firsthand. I would be interested, as I think in the mayor's letter, it mentioned the city has hired a licensed site professional, LSP. So that would be good information to have, what the findings were if they anticipate further contamination cleanup, because that would be an additional cost. Again, I'm just looking at things that might make development difficult or raise costs in the future. I think that's all I have for now, but it also would be helpful. I think that site plan that you had up there, I'm not sure I have a copy of that. If you could, post that online or send that to the council, that would be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
I could also speak, Counselor, to the LSP's work. We'll provide further documentation about it, but the licensed site professional, again, for the same type of concerns you noted, we wanted to make sure not only where the wetlands were on the property, but also what other soil conditions there might be or other contaminants on the property, hazmat type issues, if any, that we could identify as part of the typical due diligence before buying the property. So we reached out to the regional planning agency because they had some funds available to do these assessments with a consultant they have on call. The LSP did essentially a phase 1 assessment, which is to look at the property's historic usage, any documentation available, state inventories of cleanups or things like that have been done in the past, any type of documentation available, and visit the site, assess it, and basically determine whether or not further testing might be needed on the site, what sort of likelihood there is of contaminants. They put that report together. We can provide that information to you. Generally speaking, their findings were that there were 2 prior cleanups that were done. One was for some railroad material that had been stored on site. The other one was, I think, a removal of a tank that was up towards the street. And as part of looking at those cleanups, looking at the prior use of the property and all the documentation that was provided by the National Guard, they determined that there was not a need for additional testing. They did not recommend that. They did not think that we would find anything of concern. It was one of my initial concerns when we talked about buying the property, mainly because I knew that the garage building had been used for vehicle maintenance, and I wanted to make sure that if we were going to be constructing, either where the garage is today or anywhere else on the property, we have the best possible information. We know with the rail trail project, we ran into some unfortunate cleanup that needed to be done there from historic uses. So, again, we defer to the LSP who's done this initial phase 1 assessment. What they did recommend, however, was that we go further in looking in the building to test for lead, asbestos, and PCBs that would be, and this is the material that would be in the paint and the caulking potentially. Around the windows, for instance, for sealing. So the plan is to have that done in the next couple of weeks. Unfortunately, because of the very thorough and bureaucratic process that one has to go through to buy this land, working with the state, we have not yet gotten the license yet to have them go out there and physically do the testing in the building. But we're expected to have that by this week or next week so that we can get our consultant out there and then circle back with that remaining information from the LSP.
Okay, yeah, that would be great information to have. And just one more quick question. Do you know, is there mold in the building? I've heard rumors about it, but do we know this for sure? Or is the building habitable right now?
I have not done any testing myself. I know that the Parks Department has been using it for storage, as have a few other departments over time. I definitely have heard that repeated on a number of occasions that is a concern in the building. I haven't experienced sort of the smell of it myself, in the building, having gone through some walkthroughs, but I do know that is a concern, if you will. My expectation, if there's going to be any sort of substantial long-term use of the building, is that we would probably want to gut it and use essentially the shell that's there, and sort of address any issue like that. But I would have to defer to others who may have done any actual testing or more frequently in the building, say from the Parks Department.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any further comments, questions from councilors? Councilor Macaulay.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of questions. My first comment is I see I'm approaching this as 2 different items: the land transaction itself, and then a discussion later about any type of use or future use, right? So in my approach to this in the land transaction, do we know how much usable square footage there is in this property?
I don't know off the top of my head. We can get that number for you. We have,
Okay.
generally, I don't know off the top of my head what that area is, but we generally know, looking at this aerial photograph, just if you wanted to visualize it, that it basically follows this fence line and then basically takes a jog in. Councilor Wallace noted the wet pavement. That's because there's essentially a finger of wetland area that the scientist flagged over here. So all of that portion here is really not usable towards the back. So we're really talking about, just behind the building up towards the front is the best case scenario for us.
Yeah, I understand, our estimates. I'm looking for what we think is a usable square footage, because my next question is, what do we think the market value is on this property? I've heard repeatedly that we're getting a great deal and it's 25 cents on the dollar, but it's 2.5 acres. If 30,000 square feet is buildable, then it's not necessarily that great a deal. And if I layer in the condition of the building that may have asbestos and mold and structural issues that's going to have to be taken down or fixed or whatnot, then all of a sudden the good deal isn't necessarily a good deal, right? So I'm just looking to see if we can uncover some facts about usable square foot, what the potential market value would be comparable to the costs we have. Thank you.
Will do.
Councilor Z.
Andy, just a couple questions for you. So the first one is, can you explain what is our current arrangement on this for the use of this building? Is there a long-term lease? Is it just a handshake agreement from years ago? What grants us the ability to use this land now?
Yeah, I apologize. I actually don't know the details of the history of that. I have not seen, or I'm not aware of the formal document between the National Guard and the city. I know that it's been used that way, a portion of the building, I should say, because the National Guard does retain, roughly a third or a quarter of the building for storage right now for themselves. But I know that arrangement's been going on for a number of years. I don't know the details or formality of that. It wasn't an area I was focused on looking at the future scenario, but it's a good point. We can certainly circle back with you on that detail if you're interested.
Right. Yeah, it'd be important to know. So I'm not aware of any issues with us continuing to use the property now as we have for many years. My understanding over the last couple of years is we've kicked up the dust in terms of wanting to purchase this property. It wasn't them looking to dispose of it and seeking a buyer. And we said, oh goodness, they're selling it. I guess we better get on this. It was more of it was initiated by us. So understanding if there is, it's interesting that you're going to seek a license agreement now when actually it doesn't seem very clear as to what the underlying agreement was in the first place on the land. So if you're able to turn up any information on that, that would be great. Obviously a document, and I know, it might not be one. I know with the Coast Guard station out on Plum Island, it took several months, I think, to find an old agreement that somehow described how or when the city could use that building. This was going back a couple of years. All right, so that's the first question.
Sure.
The second question is the license that you are currently seeking from DCAM, I suppose, or the National Guard. I'm not sure which entity, but to do more testing. Does that cover only the building, or does that also give you the permission to run borings elsewhere on the site and test?
Sure. Actually,
negotiated at the moment.
Yeah, so the phase 1 assessment from the LSP, the additional work they did, again, they were reporting to us, working with the regional planning agency. This is not coming from the state or the National Guard. Their recommendation to us, or their response to us, is they did not feel we needed to do soil testing. So we never followed up and asked the National Guard to do testing, because our own LSP was essentially saying, we don't think it's necessary, based on the prior usage and prior reporting quite substantial on the property. Then with the second report from the consultant, which isn't available yet, that's going to come in about maybe another week or two once the consultant gets out there. The license is just essentially a formality at this point, getting signed the next couple of days. They are going to be testing only in the building. And then again, that's because our own LSP had said, we don't think you need to test on the site, but we do still recommend you test in the building for these things, these ancillary things you might find there. So the testing they will be doing is specifically for asbestos, lead, and PCBs inside the building. The lead and asbestos are physical testing, and the PCBs is a visual inspection to determine which materials might, typically have that. So again, typically that's paint or caulking around windows, things like that. And that report, when it comes back from the LSP, will also be available to us as part of the due diligence information that we were gathering in prior to purchase of the property. So we expected to provide that information to you before the council makes its vote on whether to acquire the property.
Okay. And then just continue with questions before I comment on anything. With respect to the wetlands and the flagging and the so forth, so the person who flagged it was somebody that the city hired, and that money that was used to pay that person came as part of the $60,000 appropriation that was made last year. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I had recommended early on to the mayor before we engaged the architect that it would not be, to me, it did not seem responsible to have the architects do a feasibility study without knowing where the wetlands were, given that, in a quick walk of the property, it's pretty apparent, how extensive it was in the back. So, so we did do that first, and that consultant, as you pointed out, was a surveyor and wetland scientist hired by the city, and then that information was then passed on to the architects.
Got it. But to Councillor Wallace's point, because this is not my wheelhouse, that's great. That's somebody we've hired to tell us here's where the wetlands are, but that isn't the final answer. Basically, the final answer comes from Concom after they review the work, correct? And then they grant an ANRAD or whatever it's called in order to sort of certify or state, yes, definitively, this is where the lines are, where the wetlands are.
Yeah, just to be clear, I think actually the wetland boundary is pretty conservative. You can tell it pretty much comes up to the asphalt it is today. You're right that the commission is the ultimate determination locally, and unless something gets appealed to the state, they determine and confirm those plans. Councilor Wallace is correct that those plans are essentially certified for a 3-year period. Again, I'm not, in terms of purchasing the property, knowing that there's a pretty conservative wetland, flagging coming up towards the back of that parking area. I'm not sure, again, if the council is interested in finding that plan, we certainly can do that after acquiring the property. But I don't think, based on our discussion with the National Guard, they're not interested in, having additional restrictions or things like that placed on the property. So the idea of them essentially flagging the wetlands of the property and sort of, potentially restricting themselves before they've actually had a transfer to the city, that may not make sense for them. So I have no problem if the council wants to appropriate funds for us to, or from some other account to just file with the Conservation Commission. But the state would need to be a party since they're the owner right now. And after we own it, we could do
right.
it.
Well, I can certainly understand as a fiduciary for their organization, it would not make sense to uncover more problems. But as a buyer on this side of the fence, we're trying to do what we're supposed to do in order to answer the questions that, I think Councilor McCauley brought up a good point, is the value of the property is relative to, what you could really potentially do with the property for any use, for any building. And that's a combination of wetlands, environmental, and so forth. At the end of the day, many things are surmountable, but at great cost. And so, to me, all right, so at this point, so let me ask the last question before I comment more. So as far as timeline goes, I just want to make sure I understand, what the administration's expectation is here. So we basically have 3 more city council meetings prior to 12/31, I believe, if memory serves, and that's what's on the calendar. Of course, there's always potential for additional meetings to be scheduled, but that's basically what we have. We have 2 in November, I believe, and 1 in December. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Is the intent basically that the remaining information you intend to give us is that environmental piece on the building itself, and that's about it? And then basically that's plus the information we already have, and that's the cumulative information. Is that and then you want to vote prior to 12/31? So in other words, at the latest for our only meeting in December.
Yeah, that's correct in terms of the state giving us until December 31st to deal with the city council's action and the closing itself on the property. I do think, based on, again, this is just as a land use planner and someone who deals with the development process on a regular basis, I do think that we have sufficient information at this time, regardless of, even a few feet difference in that wetland boundary. To me, it still seems wise, based on the purchase price, to purchase this property, even its continued use by the city, and ensuring that long term for the Parks Department, for instance, is much better to me, based on the purchase price that's being proposed. But you're correct that that's the only remaining information we're expecting to be able to bring forward before the end of the calendar year.
Okay, I'll yield for the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, Council Khan. Council Khan, you're muted, I believe.
There we go. Can you
There
hear
you
me
go.
now?
Yes, I
Yeah,
can.
sorry about that. Yeah, no, I just wanted to, I thought there were some really good questions asked here, and I really want to just echo my support in us being able to actually see the property. And that is something that we have not, I personally have not. So I do want to offer some support in that. My other point, because I do remember when we approved doing the wetland delineation discussion here, I think I remember to be appropriated some money for that. One of the things, though, that in kind of looking at 57 Low Street from our previous kind of things that are on the city's website was the aspect, and I know Andy, you and I talked about before, but in terms of the historical commission and how it was noted on the historic registry, but I believe the portion we're looking at is not kind of tied to that, or is it?
Yeah, Counselor, that's a good question. I'll just give you a quick synopsis, and if you want more further information, let me know. Historically, essentially what happened from the records we have, we can tell, is essentially the National Guard was looking to get some state or federal funds, I think it was federal, for improvements to the National Guard property, including the garage building years ago. And in order to obtain those funds, they had to have the building, or it was beneficial in the ranking to have the building listed as a historic feature of the Commonwealth. Oddly, I think based on little information available relative to this building or anybody who used it that was significant, the Mass Historical Commission agreed that it should be listed or added to that inventory. It's obviously, I think, quite distinct from the Powder House next door, which clearly has a historical background to it. So because that odd listing actually came up as we were looking at the property and having some exchange about, restrictions or limitations and, status of the property that would be acquired by the city, this parcel A1. And we had an exchange with Mass Historical. We had an exchange with the local commission here. And what we were able to determine is that the local commission did not, in a nutshell, did not feel that there was any historical significance to this building and had no objection to whether it was purchased by the city or demolished or reused. The Mass Historical Commission did not want to delist of the building. I think that's just out of their general practice. They don't like the idea of delisting things. It might bring into question other things that might be delisted. So their preference was to essentially sign a memorandum of agreement with, I think it was certainly with the city, I think it was National Guard signed as well, just indicating that if the city was going to do any project in the future, that we would agree to run those plans by Mass Historical first, just given its prior listing as a historical resource of the Commonwealth. I don't think, based on any information that we've seen, that it is a significant resource. And as you can tell from Mass Historical and the local commission's action, they don't seem to think that it has any historical significance either.
Okay, so that would just need to be done. If we did proceed, it would need to be also then from our historical commission would need to weigh in on that too.
There isn't a requirement that a local commission look at it, but
Okay.
I would certainly have I would have to imagine that we would, given that we're going to be sending it to Mass Historical. It would make complete sense for us to, it would be odd for us not to go to our own commission as well. However, given their prior discussion, they may not be have any particular interest in it. Their interest in it may actually be more so because of its proximity to the Powder House.
Okay, and then my other question, and I don't know if it's for you or Ethan or someone else, but in terms of that amount of 220,000, I do remember when they did the public hearing on that, and I'm trying to recall what the answer was, but in terms of that monetary amount, given the nature of the wetlands or just even the nature of the building itself and all these things we're uncovering, is there any wiggle room on that price, that sale price?
That sales price.
Do you know if that was mentioned?
Oh, sorry, that sales price was based on an appraisal. And like I said, there's a sort of discounted purchase for the municipality. But it was based on an appraisal. So, there was a question asked earlier about how many square feet are available sort of upland, if you will, for development. And we can circle back with that number. But it was based on an appraisal from, under normal practices for appraising property values. So.
Okay, and then one last question. If we were not to, let's say we did not purchase this, would they then be able to turn around and sell it to anyone else? Like, I mean, I guess this is my naivety. Is it just a unique opportunity for municipality? And then otherwise it would be something that's state, some type of a state agency?
Yeah, I don't know, I don't know that it was on the National Guard's, radar, 10 years ago, for instance, to sell this property. I defer to the mayor as to the dialogue and the time frame for that, how far back it extended. But it may actually be that because they've done this recent appraisal and they've looked at the value of the property and maybe they have other needs, maybe they would look, if the city didn't acquire it, to, have some other entity purchase it and then use those funds for something else the National Guard needs, either at this site or elsewhere. So it's possible that, they would look to do that, given that they really haven't made much use of this area of the property, except for one garage bay that they do some miscellaneous storage in. So it's, I definitely think it's in the city's interest, both in terms of time frame. We certainly, the mayor has spent a significant amount of time working with the National Guard to to get to this point. And I definitely think, like I said, we could certainly debate the square footage of the wetland boundaries and so forth. We do have the LSP's report. I do think it makes sense for us to purchase this property. But as to that likelihood of the National Guard, immediately going out there and saying, well, the city's not going to buy it, maybe some other entity will, but that would be hard for me to predict right now.
Okay, that's all I have right now, Chair. Thank you.
So I have Councilor Zede and Wallace, but I'm real interested in this concept of a market value and actually following up on Councilor Macaulay's comments and also the large council just now. So the value, this property, as we purchase it, can only be used for municipal purposes. So I guess the value to us would be different than the appraised value of this piece of property. The value to the city would be what it would cost to get a similar size parcel in the city, right? If we determine we have a need, whether it be for the Parks Department or for the Fire Department or any other department, then the real value to us is the equivalent size property somewhere else in the city, if available. And I don't think the appraisal would show that, right? So the concept of a market value for this particular land is, from an economic perspective, a little hard to arrive at. So my question, is it possible to get the appraisal, for us to see the appraisal? Can you get that to us?
I can check on that and circle back with you, sir. I certainly have a list of 6 or 7ben things already that you're looking for.
Yeah. We're loading you up.
Yeah,
but the appraisal would be useful. I mean, it seems pretty, that along with the wetlands, once we delineate that and see how much space is developable by us, usable. I would call it not developable, usable by us, and what the alternatives are for the city. That's a decision tree that I would use. So
yep, sure, yep, I will circle back, provided there's no reason that can't be conveyed. In terms of our negotiation, I certainly will pass it on.
All right. Councilor Zede had his hand up first, so I will recognize him. Both Councilor Zede and Councilor Wallace have spoken before. Councilor Zede?
Sure. Hopefully I'll be quick. So one question I had, I forgot 2 more on my list here. So one is that you mentioned that the city can't do an ANRAD because we basically don't own the property. So in order to do it, you would need assent or even application or to make the National Grid an applicant, which I gather they're not terribly interested in. But the city did file an ANR with the planning board, did they not, back in a couple months ago, or even, what was it, August maybe? And we were the applicant. How can the city be the applicant for an ANR if we can't do an ANRAD on the same property?
No, the state agreed to that with us because it's actually necessary for the transaction. The property can't be sold to us without a plan that shows the exact meets and bounds that would be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. So for that reason, the National Guard did agree to that local filing.
Okay. And then the other question I wanted to ask maybe is better for Ethan. Actually, I thought I saw Ethan on here. Maybe we lost him. Or Matt Coogan, if he wants to answer. I'd like to hear a little bit of a justification for using free cash. That's another aspect to this whole discussion, is that's the funding source here. The mayor has stated several times that she thinks next year is going to be kind of a disaster financially. So I'm curious as to what is the argument for that source of funding to be used?
I would have to defer. I think the finance director is here this evening. I would have to defer if he perhaps knows more on that.
I don't see him here now. We can, I mean, we're gonna meet again on this, so why don't we just hold that off, and, is
Sure. Yeah, it looks like you might have had to leave. Yeah.
that all right, Counselor?
Thinks we can address it in a future meeting.
Yeah. Counselor Wallace?
Yeah, sure. Just a couple things. Just wanted to follow up about the ANRAD discussion, just so everybody understands. You can either do an ANRAD before you develop a site, just if you really want to know where that wetland line is. Otherwise, if you go to develop the site later, you have that wetland line certified at the time that your development plans are also certified. So that's the notice of intent. So those are the two different ways. So at some point there would be a public process. The question, and it would be reviewed by the Conservation Commission. The question is, do you want to have that now, or do you want to kind of risk that when you do the development? So just to clarify that. And then just a quick question for Andy that maybe, or direct report, that maybe either a site visit or the site plan would help me understand. But can you explain the swales out front and where the drainage goes? Is there an outlet pipe onto the property, or is it swales going alongside Low Street?
Yeah, I actually, I don't know the details of, I know that looking at the wetland and the resource area delineations in basically the entire business park is really this side of the street is going into the business park. There's been lots of wetland surveying and looking at the swales over certainly the time that I've been here. And before that, I think that it's essentially, it's probably partially connected and partially disconnected from a series of swales that essentially go out to the Parker River area, sort of, head south essentially. It basically goes to the southern end of the business park towards the Newbury line as you're going down essentially Parker Street and Scotland Road. It all kind of dumps out there. So there's a network of swales. Some of them are connected well, some of them are not. Some of them have been overgrown over time with vegetation. I can follow up with the city engineer and try to get you some more detail on that for this immediate location or proximity towards the street. But for all practical purposes, I think based on what the commission's looked at further down on Parker Street, where we talked about the Complete Streets project that's being done, or Kelly's Hardware, is that location right there. There's lots of wetland vegetation in that area right there, but that is treated as a stormwater conveyance because that's the way it was designed to convey water along the roadway. And the commission is allowing that project, our bike path, to be constructed there, as well as the culvert of a portion of that drainage that's there, so that project can be done over essentially a man-made conveyance. So I think that is how this would be treated here, but we can try to get more information about where the daylight is for that connection and otherwise.
Yeah, so and then the other question too is are there drainage structures on this site? It doesn't seem to be, but again, something to follow up on.
Yep. So the surveyor located everything that they could locate, and that's also in conjunction with the Department of Public Services, because typical of this, the surveyors do this, and we'd ask them as part of their scope of work to check with the city engineers department on any plans that were available for that. So the plan that we have from them is the survey plan is supposed to show all that information. But like I said, I'll circle back with the city engineer and see if there's any further information that we can find.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Right, we spent 6:22 now. I think we've got a number of good questions and to follow up on. Chair Shan, do you have any other questions, comments from planning and development?
I would say no. We can certainly adjourn our meeting.
Oh, okay. If you adjourn your meeting, then Budget and Finance will continue.
So
We're going to hold, again, we're going to hold this in committee.
we're going to keep it in committee, right?
Yeah, we're going to take this out
Motion to,
on the 9th and bring it back in as committee of the whole, just so
Correct.
everyone knows that. Yep.
motion to adjourn P&D.
Second, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Andy, I'm gonna say, oh, good. I have control of my screen again. Here we go. So that's all right. So next on the agenda is the Bradley Fuller field. We have 3 measures before us. Let's see, we have Order 132 and Order 136 and Communication 189. We have also received, whoops, not that, documentation from the Director of Parks Department that, and then later today, we received this breakdown of the cost of the total project, and this document that you see, which outlines the sources of revenue for the project. So I think, unless the Parks Director wants to jump into it right away and give us an overview, I think we're pretty familiar with it. I certainly, invite you to do that, but I would go directly to questions, and I see Councilor McCauley has stayed on. I'm glad, so I would certainly invite him to ask questions as well. So do any councilors have any questions or want me, and tell me if you want me to switch what you're seeing. What this is, of course, is a bond order that came through community preservation funds, for about $694,820. Councilor Zede.
I'm sorry, that document you just had, not this one, the funds available, when did that one, where did
That
that
just arrived this afternoon.
Don't think I got it either.
I
If
didn't get
Councilor
it.
Z-
Oh, maybe
I didn't.
maybe it was just sent to me. At least did you
That's right.
just?
I'm happy to email it out right now if that's helpful.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa.
Let me see. Can I make it bigger? How's that?
Yes, that is legible for sure. Okay, I'll yield for the moment. I just wanted to say I didn't get this, and that was actually something I was
Yeah,
looking
and so you didn't get this one either. This is similar to what we received before,
No.
but the numbers are updated. That I just got that. Ran out, walked my dog, came into the meeting. All right, are there? So why don't we look at? Wait a minute. Here it goes. Why don't we look
Are
at
there a
this?
lot of? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Councilor Khan.
No, I'm sorry. I should have raised my hand. I guess it would be nice from when we looked at that breakdown if there was any changes, and I'm trying to recall, and I can't. So I don't know if that latest breakdown had any red line version, or is there no change?
Okay, may I answer that question?
Yes, please.
Okay,
You're speaking about the sources of revenue, right? Councilor Khan?
Right, are you talking about the full budget cost?
Oh, no,
budget?
the full budget, because I feel like when we had some hearings on it, there was some kind of
This one.
modifications. I thought to this one, yeah, that's
Yeah,
all.
okay.
I was wondering.
So that budget is the most recent official budget that I have from our project architect, and this was done last February. However, there are changes to this, and the only change that we've made is that we took the, so in this budget, you'll see building improvements allowance for about 175,000. We have costed this out in-house, and we're actually in the process of making improvements to that building. And it's less than this. It's about 15,000 less than this cost that is the allowance that's here.
And did you have the line item that comes from, or not? Is it across the board?
Oh, a line item that no, because we costed it out using different items. We didn't break it out in the way that he has broken it out here. I
Okay.
mean, we were very specific. We had the roof, we had, we just had like every little nickel and dime piece of lumber that we were going to use and plumbing costs. And so it was a little more, our budget was a little more specific. I know that the roofing was definitely cheaper than we had anticipated.
So it's even cheaper than this
It's even less than, so
172690?
this is, yeah, it's updated. I did this document on Friday, and since then we completed the billing. We received the billing for the roof, and I realized I had based this number on we got 3 roofing estimates. I had based this number on a different roofer. So when I noticed that bill and I went back to the numbers and realized that our estimates for the renovation of the field building is actually even less than this.
Sorry, Councilor Khan, I kind of jumped in there in front of you.
Other than that,
Oh, no, that's okay.
So other than that, we haven't made any adjustments to the cost estimates that the project architect provided us with. I did speak with him today to just to discuss, since this estimate is almost a year old. And he said that he would stand by this estimate, that he felt, depending on how soon we go out to bid, bidding now is coming in very favorable. So he felt that this was still valid estimates, that the prices haven't gone up.
And Councilor Z, I'll let you go.
Oh, it's okay. If you want to go, I can wait for a second, no problem.
So the question I had was on the grandstand. So we're still at 340 seats for the grandstand, as indicated
Right,
here.
between 300 and 340. So he put it in as 340. We had talked about bringing it down to 300, but why we just left the cost at 340 almost as, sort of an extra contingency.
Okay, yep. Councilor Z, did you want to?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One is, would the administration consider going out to bid and then coming back to us with an actual number so that we can, I realize that this debate's been had, but in the past over whether you can do that, but it is doable because we've done it on several occasions, actually, as we've learned, where we've gotten the request for the money after the bid came back. Is there a willingness to try that? Maybe that's the question for Ethan.
I don't think Ethan is on anymore.
Oh, he just.
Sorry,
he is.
Counselor,
I
I'm
see
back
him.
now.
Yeah.
You're back.
I see him.
Oh, there you are. I do see you. Yeah, Ethan.
He came back in the teleporter. Yeah.
So yeah, it really comes down to timing between when the bid is issued and then when the contract needs to be awarded. So it's been done and it's doable. It just kind of depends on the project timeline as to whether or not it can be done.
Can we do it here? Would you do it here?
But I don't understand the question. Would you? Put it
Would
out
you?
to-
I mean, yeah, go and put this out to bid, come back. I mean, the thing is, this is kind of an interesting thing, right? We're looking at a spreadsheet from February with minor adjustments. An architect is telling us, okay, here's what I think the cost is. And then we have a funding allocation that we're looking to make. And I gather, I think, if I'm correct, that the improvements that you've moved forward on already, you're funding those out of the 274. Is that where that money's coming from the roof and so forth that you've already proceeded on?
That's correct. Actually, the 274 is what's remaining. We have paid, so mainly what we've paid out so far is the roof, a substantial amount in design engineering costs, and as well as we had some unexpected permitting because the project was delayed. We had to order a new wetlands delineation because they expire. So we had that done and some additional permitting. So altogether, we've spent just over 84,000. So our remaining project exposure according to our revised phase 2 budget is now 969,100.
Oh, so the 274 is already net of what you've.
That 274 is 280 is cash on hand, right? That's
Got it.
what's in the coffers from remaining from prior year CPA primarily right now.
Got it. Well, that's, I guess that, so, you know, Charlie, if, you know, to answer your question, what I'm asking is, would you just go put this out to bid and come back to us with the lowest bid that you're willing to accept? So we have a number that we know it can be built for. That's the, you know, that's my question. And the second question I have, and then I'll just, because I only have two, is, you know, is this the top priority for parks? So CPA money can be used, you know, could be used for other park things because that fits into the open space category, I think, or recreation, right, of the CPA. And we hear a lot about so many needs for different parks and so forth. We're in the midst of a pandemic. Is this what we want to do? And is this what we want to issue debt for right now? That's a philosophical question, a policy question. I don't know. To whomever wants to answer.
So is that question for me to answer?
Well, sure. On the
Please.
parks needs, for sure. I mean, I've heard some murmurs about the Bartlett Mall having, you know, heading into trouble, the water. I don't know how true those are. You know,
Yeah.
again, we hear a lot of other things. We need so much for our parks and so forth. And here, we're basically extending to a new something completely new rather than say working on something we already have. And you know, I'm questioning that basically. Is this the top priority for parks?
Well, I wouldn't call it top priority. We have many priorities. I mean, this is a project that's been out there for a long time. That's a very important project. We'd like to get it done. It's one of many projects. Yes, the Bartlett Mall is another large project. I mean, I'd like to complete one project before we take on another large project, and we would be eventually looking for funding for, we have received some funding for the northwest corner of the Bartlett Mall, which we'll be proceeding with. We're waiting to hear about some state funding to supplement that funding before we move ahead. But yes, the pond is an important project that we'd also like to get done, but I just, you know, to start a large project like this athletic field project and then to kind of drop it in midstream to hop over to another important project, I think is kind of a bad way of doing things.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I mean, I'm a strong proponent of that philosophy, but respectfully, I think there's a lot of parks projects that are kind of started, but are sort of, you know, for one reason or another, you know, challenged to get completed. And I know you're under a lot of pressure and time and staffing is tight. So why did this come back now, I guess? So we last discussed this in December, I think, of 2019, if my memory serves correctly. So it's that say 10 months or so, it hasn't been in our court, so to say. So why did it come back now?
Actually,
Well,
Counselor, I can
Did we miss
address that.
something? Yeah, sure.
Well, yeah, we had this checklist as a result of the wait a minute. There it goes. Nope, that's not it.
No, yeah, right.
We had a checklist, and so actually in August, I approached the Parks Director and asked what progress had been made. And at that point, she indicated, well, we've made a lot of progress. However, I told her that I didn't want to bring it out while we were doing the budget process. I just didn't think we could give it the attention it needed. So I said that we would focus on it after we did the budget process. The other thing, and I think this circles back to your question on timing and whether it can go out to bid. I spoke with the finance director about you know, when the city would anticipate you know, issuing bonds, and that was one factor. And then the other factor is when would the Parks Department have to have the money to be able to initiate this project at the beginning of construction period next year. So I kind of pushed to bring this out now. That's on me. And I just, you know, partly because I hate to have things hanging around in committee. Is that Councilor Zede? You still there?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
here.
There you
Thank
are,
you
yeah.
thank you for giving me that little bit of background.
But I would like to circle back on the timing issue and maybe put that one to sleep on whether or not going out to bid. Let's see, Matt Coogan is here and Ethan is still here, although muted right now. I mean, can the two of you address that? And maybe, and also, I mean, because these are the pieces, when would we have to, go out in the bond market? And when do we need to know whether or not this is available for the Parks Department so that they can begin to the actual construction? So I need help on timing for all those pieces. Anyone?
I'm happy to speak on the borrowing timeline.
Yep.
So we'll next need to go to market in April to roll over some short-term notes that will be maturing.
Yep.
Which means that if there were other needs, it would make sense to issue them at the same time. And typically with a loan order, you're looking at a 20-day referendum period, which kind of puts you back another month. So yeah, I think as far as borrowing goes, and again, this is probably more driven by the project timeline, I think we would need to have the loan order approved, I'd say February at the latest.
Got it. And Lisa, in terms of construction timeline?
Yeah, so that all works with our construction timeline. As far as going out to bid sooner, I think I'd have to consult with maybe Matt knows, or even Ethan, but I think I'd like to consult with the procurement officer to see if there are standards or requirements in terms of how long a window you can have for actually contracting after the bid. If you can extend that period by a number of months between when the bid is finalized and when you actually contract.
Yep. Ethan and Matt, do you have any idea on that?
Yeah, so the typical IFB has the contract being awarded within 30 days. Granted, there are extensions, but yeah, 30 days would be the standard. So if the council were to want the bids, it would need to be a pretty quick turnaround.
So I mean, if you need obviously you're not going to go out to the bond market without the loan order being passed. You can't.
No.
And the loan order takes you what, at least 20 days, you said?
Yes.
So it's, I mean, and it's just, so you could go out to bid potentially in 30 days. When you get them and then put off construction until a couple months later. Can you do that? I mean, does this work?
I mean, I'm assuming we can contract and then have the construction start date be further down the line.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of the window of time between putting out the bid and when we offer a contract.
And I'll ask the Ward 1 council on this. And we're doing. And tell me again, why would we want to do this?
I guess I mean, it's a fair question. Obviously, why go through this? It's frankly, it's a reflection of my sort of worry about the cost accuracy. That's basically the thing that's what you get by going to bid first. Is you get a surety on the cost, because now you've got somebody who is telling you, I will build this thing for this amount. And so I actually had the opposite view, having seen a bunch of projects. I think it actually lines up pretty well. I mean, February gives you the time you need probably to put I don't assume the bid package is ready at this point. I'm assuming that you know, I mean, it might be meant much of the way there, but it's maybe not all the way there. And then you put it out, and then you have to have a 30-day period, right? Or whatever you choose, maybe 60 days for bids to come in. And then, you know, and then you have a selection period, like you said, and then you need the council to approve the bond. So I actually think it, you know, lines up decently. But the answer to your question is
Yeah, I get it,
confidence
yeah.
in the cost. That's
Yeah.
basically the question. So I think I've remarked anyways. I mean, architects, you know, they miss the mark. Frankly, it's got nothing to do with anybody on our end. It's just sometimes they just miss it, and we saw that on some other projects, and we've seen that on some of the school projects too, especially. And if we can get that, I don't see why not. I guess I'm not seeing a downside to the idea. As far as the project itself goes, because we had a lot of questions, I mean, you know, just to wrap those up, you know, I don't really know anymore. I don't, you know, COVID makes everything more difficult. Like, should you be building a grandstand for a ton of people to get together when it doesn't seem like there's any horizon for when 340 people will be able to get together again?
2022.
2022. So I mean, but you know, but the interesting thing is that it's, you know, this is actually a pretty big project, right? It's $1 million project. I think by any scale, that's a good project. And it's new debt, you know, and we're taking on new debt. Now, I get it. Like, it's coming off the CPA, and CPA has got its own whole thing. And that's why I was asking, you know, what else is going on in parks, because trying to keep narrow to what you could do with CPA money, as much as I want to go out and pave more roads and stuff. I get it. That's not what CPA money is for. You know, but that's I mean, those are the things I have in the back of my head is, you know, why now? You know, why use this money for that purpose if there's other things? I don't know. So and you know, the bathrooms and stuff like that was a big question. I mean, I see on the thing you've got you know, you've got that you went down. I know the building department's in a little bit of instability at the moment, but you've got some sort of you know, approval on cutting down the number of bathrooms, which I gather is needed. And then the only other thing I remember as being a bit controversial was the ticket thing. I don't know what to call it, ticket stand. And that's, you know, that's still in there. I think it's 35 grand on the sheet out of $1 million. So it's not like the biggest part of the project, but
I thought what was I thought what was controversial about that, there was going to be a separate new building. And Lisa, you can correct me on that. It hasn't been incorporated into the current shed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There's no additional building being built. It is being added on to
Yeah.
the back of the shed that's in the was that the northwest corner of the track.
okay. And then you carry the fencing right all the way around to keep non-payees out if you wish to.
Right, a little bit more fencing.
But
Most of the fencing has been around, but so another point about this project being important to finish it is the walk. For one thing, you know, putting the walkways all around the track really protects the surface from deteriorating faster than it should in some places, which it is doing. And also, you know, getting the parking and drop-off area in there, I feel is important for public safety, because people are using the site, regardless of the fact that, you know, I mean, they're finding ways to use the site. It's a large space. They can use it and social distance. I get your point about adding a grandstand at this point, but eventually we anticipate people will need the grandstand, and you know, doing it all at once makes sense in terms of, you know, economies of scale and mobilization and all that. It really, all that concrete work needs to be done at one time.
Well,
So, yeah. Councilor Z, did you?
I was going to say that I appreciate that on the new building. I think that's helpful, very helpful.
So I think my sense is we're not ready to bring this out first meeting in November. I think we give administration a chance to circle back on the idea of putting it out to bid first, and then we could discuss that. I would like, Councilor McCauley, you had a number of questions. I'm just wondering if you want to jump in now, make some comments, so they could be addressed if we have any concerns.
Sure. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity. I'll try to be brief. I have a process question first. It seems that we've closed out project one, but we have a balance that wasn't returned to the CPA and is just kind of in limbo as one of these open accounts. Is that is that how we do things? We let this $274,000 sit in limbo and not return it. Is there any restriction on the CPA fund that they have? If it's not spent within, let's say, a year or so, it's got to be returned to them and then reappropriated?
I can help with that too, if you want to, because we've talked about that at length. Maybe Ethan can give the.
Yeah, I'll go to Ethan on that if he doesn't mind.
Sorry about that. Couldn't find the mute button. Yeah, so in terms of CPC projects, they do require, the CPC does require project managers to check in with them. I believe it's done on an annual basis. And they do permit projects to continue on until they're completed. It's not unusual that a project carries over at least 1 or 2 fiscal years, depending on the size of it.
Well, that's nice, but this phase of the project finished, right? So wouldn't that be a closeout? I mean, my point is that it appears in the process that phase 2 has already begun without full approval, in so much that they're making improvements to the existing building down there without without approval for appropriations for that. I'm just trying to understand the process of that.
May I answer that
Please,
question?
yeah, please.
Well, I mean, I guess I'd have to go back and look at the wording of the applications,
Yeah,
but
this is just too long.
I mean, these allocations, it was my understanding, were for the greater project as a multi-phase project. And we were able to use them toward phase 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, okay. So I'd like to, as follow-up to that, as the administration is putting together some answer, I'd be glad to get an answer. As I said, it was a process question as much as anything else. And I think I've gotten my answer, but I don't think, to your point, Lisa, that there's enough information here for me to have an answer that this is phase 1, 2, and 3, right? It says a continuation of phase 2, but I'd like to see the language of that. And that's me in a process. But to the, so I'll drop that for now. I want to be fair to Councilor Tontar for allowing me to speak. I do have, I am going to go back to the stadium. I see here the stadium drives bathrooms, right? There's no two ways around that, and that's why I'm going back to it. The stadium is going to require 6 women's bathrooms and 3 men's bathrooms. I know you've gotten you locally, we feel we're in a position to get a variance, but the state plumbers, the law is in the Uniform State Plumbing Code, right? And the State Plumbing Commission, whatever ruling body it is, has not given out waivers since the law was passed. And so I think it's, in my opinion, I think it's a little ambitious to plan for a waiver when the state plumbing commission is not giving out waivers, right? So I think that the plans should account for what if the variance is denied. Additionally, because this is a school field, we now run into the fact that these bathrooms are also used as locker rooms, and we have potential Title IX issues in terms of equity, in terms of how the locker rooms are with men's and women's segregated areas to make sure they're right. On top of that, there's a 2016 law on transgender restrooms that have to have adequate facilities. And so my point is the stands drive the bathroom issues. And if there is no stands, then you have much more leeway in what you can do with the bathrooms. And I'm suggesting that you reconsider the stands at this stage, regardless of whether it's convenient or not, because it's going to drive additional costs. Has that discussion gone on within the Parks Department?
So I, first of all, was pretty confident after talking with our local building inspector and plumbing inspector that they would not have a problem in the state getting this approved. And our architect assured us that he had been successful in getting similar reductions approved in recent projects. In terms of getting rid of the stands, this is being driven by residents and the schools who are using the facility and are calling for a need for these stands, a need to have a place for parents and spectators to be placed during events, practices, and competitions. So, I mean, it's a major driving force for this phase of the project.
Well, I have to.
Councilor, Councilor Z has another meeting he has to go to at 7. I'm sorry to break.
I have the same meeting, but I just want to have a comment. Is I got 65 emails one night, and they all said the same thing, that the parents were interested in improving the parking and improving the bathrooms. Of those 65, none of them mentioned stands. And so I'm asking you to reconsider. It's only I know I could support it. I could support moving this forward if there were no stands, but I can't because it doesn't. It's not in compliance. Our plan is not in compliance with state law, and so that's been my position from the get-go. So thank you very much, Councilor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Z, are you still with us?
I'm here.
You know, if you need the only other, we're going to keep this in committee, so we won't
It's
get
a very short drive to my
the
next meeting, so.
ordinance. And I think Councilor Khan and I can maybe take care of Order 218, or we could do that right now if you like before we adjourn.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I can be a few minutes off on the next one if I need to be.
Yeah, so just for a minute here before you leave, let me take out Order 218, which is the supplemental budget request, wherever it is. Here it is. That is the Essex North Shore Technical School, which has been hanging around for a while, but various things. This is, there's another student going there.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so I will bring that out. So let's go back to I think we have a couple things definitively. We have Councilor McCauley's request, and also we have the request to see if we can go out to bid before we do the loan order.
So I just have a question before I do fall off. We have another week before our next city council meeting. Is the chair, what's the intent? Like, are you going to try and call a meeting for next week for continuation of some or all of these? I'm not hot.
I would, I thought I would, if we can get the information back, yes. But I'm also, I'm thinking we're gonna need a whole night for the Low Street purchase. Again, it's dependent upon when I get information, right? But if possible, I really haven't looked at what other meetings are next week and what's open and when it's open. I'll do that tomorrow morning.
Okay, so should we plan on, should I just pencil six o'clock next Thursday or something?
Well, the problem with Thursday is that that's when planning and development normally meets. So we
need to
get
be
this
joint
deal
with them
where we're
anyways,
meeting every
right?
other week.
But we need to be joint with them anyways, right? For the
Yeah. If we can do the Low Street purchase, that would be perfect. Yeah.
Or I guess,
Yeah.
or if you wanted to wait for the out and in for the committee of the whole, I guess that would kind of gum up the time, but.
Yeah.
All right,
that's
so I'll
true.
just pencil something in for next Thursday, just to like think about it, I guess, and wait to hear if you're.
Right. I mean, it really depends on when
And then
information comes in.
just one other thing, you have a public comment. I don't know
I get it. I get
or
it.
not or whatever, but
I get it. I will go to that now. Jane Snow, I have, you're muted. And if you unmute yourself, we'd be happy to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Jane Snow, 9 Coffin Street. Ironically, as you're doing this meeting, I just got the emergency call about that Newburyport has just had 29 new cases of the virus, the highest rate we've had, and we're now in the red. So I look and listen about this Fuller track project, and from my memory of it from the beginning was the fact that the track was done and the field was there and it is being used, and that the whole purpose of the stands was to put them in the next level so that they could have, and I might have this messed up because I'm not a sports person, but it was to be able to have meets here in Newburyport, and then they could, charge money and get money for it. So when I look at that, I just don't think it's appropriate at this particular time with the virus. I think we have other really urgent things that affect the entire city, such as a fire station. And I know some of this comes out of the Community Preservation Act money, but the idea of even contemplating building a 300 to 340 seat stadium, we don't even know at this point when we'd be able to use it. And at the earliest, from what people are talking about, is 2022. So I can see taking some of the money and maybe doing things that the parks can do, like when they have some downtime and things. But I guess that brings up my second phase to this is we have so many parks that are in need of attention. We have a small parks crew. So I don't know that this project is a top priority versus keeping our parks, weeded and cleaned and maintained and snow blowing and all of that. So I would ask that this be put on hold and not go forward until we have a better understanding where we are financially because of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to adjourn Budget and Finance.
Yeah. So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, everybody. We are
Thank
adjourned.
you. Bye.
Bye.